Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, well, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that actually happen, right? And today we're diving into a real eco nightmare.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
Eco nightmare.
yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So imagine, it's a Sunday morning, you're on the coast, birds are singing, you've got that perfect cup of coffee.
Peaceful.
Exactly, peaceful.
This is perfect.
And you'd think everything's fine.
Right. You feel safe, like everything's in its place. Nature's just doing its thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But in this story, that feeling gets, well, kind of ripped away pretty quickly.
Mm.
The narrator's just enjoying that peaceful morning when they feel a tremor, almost like a shiver.
It's interesting how we react to those little things. We feel a little shake and we think, oh, it must be a truck. But sometimes there's that deeper feeling like something's off.
Like a gut feeling.
Yeah, like a gut feeling.
And in this case, that feeling is right on the money. The tremors get stronger and stronger, and before you know it, it's a full-blown earthquake. The ground actually splits open, landslides start happening, and this peaceful coast turns into total chaos.
It's not just the physical stuff that's scary, though, right? Imagine the sound, the ground shaking beneath you, everything you know just collapsing. It must be overwhelming for your senses.
It's like the earth itself is screaming or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The narrator talks about all these sounds, rocks grinding, buildings collapsing, people screaming. It's really intense.
These kinds of stories are so important because they show us what it's really like to live through something like this. It's not just about the facts, it's about the human side, the trauma.
For sure. And then right in the middle of all this, the water starts rushing in. It's like the final blow. The thing that was supposed to be beautiful and peaceful, it turns against you.
That's where the eco part really hits home. It reminds us that we're not really in control. We can build walls and try to be prepared, but nature can do what it wants.
So we've got this incredibly vivid picture of this disaster, but I'm curious about what happens next. What's it like to try and rebuild when everything you know is just gone?
Yeah, that's when things get really eerie. The narrator talks about the silence after the chaos. Like the birds have stopped singing, no more sounds of people, just this unsettling, quiet. It's like the world is holding its breath.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine. Going from all that noise and chaos to just silence. That must be so disorienting.
Absolutely. And that's when the survivors start to come out of the wreckage. They're in shock, they're grieving, but they also have this need to find their loved ones, to help each other, to start putting things back together.
I can't even imagine. I mean, surrounded by all that destruction, where do you even start?
Right. But what's interesting is that the story shows how people just kind of instinctively change. When something like this happens, people forget their differences. There's this shared purpose, like everyone's in it together.
So it's like, even though it's this horrible tragedy, it kind of brings people back together.
Exactly. And the narrator talks about these acts of courage, people helping each other out of the rubble, sharing whatever food and water they have left, making shelters for those who lost their homes. It's really amazing to see what people can do.
It's inspiring, It'd be so easy to just give up in that situation.
Yeah.
But these people, they find a way to not only survive, but to actually start rebuilding.
And that rebuilding process is fascinating in itself. It's not just about fixing buildings, it's about putting lives back together, dealing with trauma, and finding hope for the future.
So these eco-nightmares, as scary as they can also show us something really powerful about people, about our compassion and ability to bounce back.
Definitely. It reminds us that even when things are at their worst, the human spirit can still shine through.
That makes me think, are there any specific stories from this event, or maybe others like it, that really show this resilience, these acts of hope?
Oh, absolutely. The narrator mentions this group of teenagers that basically formed their own rescue team, using their knowledge of the area to reach places that the emergency responders couldn't get to. They ended up saving several lives, and they became the symbol of hope for the whole community.
Wow, that's incredible. To think that these kids in the middle of all that chaos stepped up like that.
And there are so many other stories like that. People setting up clinics, sharing their resources, cooking meals for those who lost everything. It really shows the power of human connection, how we can find strength in each other when everything else falls apart.
It reminds you that even in these eco-nightmares, there's still so much good in the world, so much humanity.
And that's so important to remember. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of these disasters, to feel helpless. But even small acts of kindness can make a huge difference for those affected.
So it's not just about surviving these events ourselves, but about helping others survive, offering support, and working together to heal and rebuild.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message, isn't it? It reminds us that even when things seem impossible, there's always hope in people, in our compassion, and in our ability to come together. It means we're not alone, and that together we can overcome anything.
That's a really powerful thought. But I'm also curious about the long-term effects of these eco-nightmares.
Yeah.
How do people and communities deal with the trauma, the fear that it could happen again?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's one thing to survive the initial event, but then you're left with all these emotional scars, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The narrator actually talks about having nightmares, flashbacks, even feeling anxious when the ground shakes a little. It's like that fear stays with you, this reminder that things can change so fast.
It makes you realize that surviving is just the first step.
Yeah.
Then there's this whole process of healing for both individuals and the community.
Yeah, and that healing looks different for everyone. Some people find it helpful to talk about what happens, to share their stories with others who understand. Others might find comfort in rebuilding things, or even just being in nature again in a way that feels safe. It's like finding those things that help you feel grounded again, to feel like yourself.
Exactly. And the support of the community makes a big difference. The narrator mentions how people from other towns came to help with the cleanup, volunteers, therapists, everyone just coming together.
So it's not just about rebuilding the physical stuff, but also the connections between people, this sense of community.
Yeah, that's when you really see the strength of a community, that ability to offer support and create a feeling of resilience together.
This has been such a powerful conversation. We've talked about how terrifying these eco-nightmares can be, the destruction and the trauma, but we've also seen how strong people can be, how much compassion there is, and the incredible power of community.
And I think that's what we should take away from this. Even when faced with these huge challenges, when it feels like the world is falling apart, there's still hope. Hope in ourselves, in our communities, and in our ability to learn from these experiences and make things better.
It's definitely something to think about. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into eco-nightmares. It's been a look into the scary side of nature, but also a reminder of the incredible strength of humanity.
It was great to be here. And remember, the more we know, the better prepared we can be. By understanding the risks and working together, we can face these challenges with more resilience and hope.
Absolutely. And maybe by sharing these stories, we can inspire others to make a difference and create a future where these eco-nightmares are less frequent and less devastating. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.